We'll tell you one experience that I thought was a good experience, and that was Sister Brawl, who I thought was going to get baptized, and this was in my first area in Arnhem. And she was a single lady, widowed, was living in Catholic housing, and the problem in Holland was housing is very difficult to get. And so either you would rent from the government or you would rent from your church. But if you joined the LDS church and you're Catholic and you're renting from the Catholics, then you would lose your home. And she had nowhere else to go. She was widowed. You know, she was no longer working. She had no money. You know, she had nowhere to go. And she'd be kicked out of her apartment. And her family was really after her not to join the church. They worked extremely hard to keep her from joining the church, even though she really, really wanted to join. And so she called us on the telephone and told us that she wasn't going to be able to be baptized. And that made Elder Anderson and I really, really, really sad, because we knew she wanted to join really bad. And so, you know, we rode our bicycles really slow to her home, and before we got there, we stopped off at a little grove of trees and decided we better have a prayer about what we should say. So we really needed help. You know, what do you say in a situation like that could help? And so we both said a prayer, and then we went to her home, and she, you know, she invited us into the home as she always had, and we sat down in her living room, and the Spirit told us to say nothing, absolutely nothing. And so we did. We just sat there stone-faced. And she finally began to talk. And as she was talking, she was crying, and she was telling us how much pressure she was under from her family and from her priest, and from the fact that she was going to lose her home. And there wasn't much that we could say, but the Spirit was so strong, letting us know that not speaking was the right thing to say. Not saying anything was the right thing to do. And we let her just completely vent and talk it out and talk about everything she was feeling. And of course we encouraged her at the end to rethink it and to see if maybe there wasn't a way that she could still be baptized. And it turned out that she couldn't. She couldn't find a way around her problem. And she wasn't baptized. But I got to tell you, in terms of a spiritual experience and the Lord telling us what to do or not to do, that was a great experience, because neither one of us knew what we could say or what we should say. And literally, we were told not to say anything, and we didn't. And it was the right thing to do.
So she never got
I
baptized?
don't think she was ever baptized, as far as I know. You know, you always hope. And you know, you always hope that, well, maybe on the other side she's going to have to be one of those. But another great experience I had with it much later in my mission was with an elder that really should have gone home, perhaps never should have gone on a mission in the first place. His father was somewhat wealthy and was an executive with a shirt manufacturing company called Arrow Shirts. Maybe you've heard of Arrow Shirts, but his dad was never home, and this particular boy needed a dad. And he grew up pretty wild, and he did everything wrong. Anything you're not supposed to do before a mission, he did it. And his dad talked the state president into letting him go anyway on this mission, and saying, well, it'll make a man out of him, it'll change him, you know, it'll help him change his mind about the church, whatever. And he was there for a little over a year when I ended up with him, and the mission president decided it's best not to tell me anything about this missionary. And I transferred into his area. So in other words, I'm coming into his area, into his territory where he's been for a few months. And I don't know a thing about the city. I don't know where the apartment is. I don't know a thing. And he meets me at the railroad station. And I say, okay, companion, let's go home. And he says, "You're the senior companion. You tell me where home is." And that was my first introduction, to this wild elder, who really didn't belong on a mission in a lot of ways. And finally, he did finally get us home, and we did go out tracking a little bit. It was extremely difficult. Sometimes he wouldn't get out of bed at all. And we were under strict orders not to leave our companion under any circumstances. They told us that if we left our companion, and our companion ended up... we were under strict orders that if we left our companion, that if that companion ended up being excommunicated, we would be excommunicated too. Therefore, we were not allowed to leave our companion regardless. Wherever the companion went, regardless. Didn't matter. We were supposed to follow him. Well, this particular companion took off one very early morning before I had woken up. So I had no idea where he went. I wasn't in charge of where he went. And of course I called the mission president with fear and trepidation. I'm thinking, man, this guy is big trouble, and he's gone. And he stayed gone for like a day and a half. And he went drinking. He found the bars and, did whichever. Who knows what all he did, but he did it. And so anyway, he finally came back, and I can't remember when he was sent home, but it was somewhere in there. But I got to tell you another story about this situation. First, we were invited by a member to give this older sister a blessing because she was sick and she wanted the elders to come give her a blessing. And it was quite a ways across town, and there were cobblestone streets, and it had rained, which of course it always does. And we were, went over there to their apartment and had kind of a nice visit with them, tried to figure out what he did for work, which he worked with mentally handicapped people, which everybody felt like he was a hero for working with these people that are so difficult to work with. But anyway, this sister was sick and she just wanted a blessing. And so anyway, my companion anointed her with the oil, and then I started to give the prayer. And just as I started giving the prayer, I was told in no uncertain terms by the Spirit that I was to stop. And I thought, whoa, stop? I mean, how can I stop? The sister's been asking for a blessing, and I'm here to give her a blessing. And how can I stop it without finishing the blessing? And so what I ended up doing is I gave one of the shortest blessings I've ever given in my entire life. But I've got to tell you, I was ordered by the Spirit to stop giving that blessing. And there was no question about it. And I thought, man, that is the weirdest thing ever. And the couple, of course, they were very surprised. And they asked me about it too, what's going on here? Well, it's just what the Spirit told me to say, and I said what what it told me to say. And so anyway, we went home on our bicycles, and we were bouncing along on these cobblestones, very rough ride. And we weren't saying a thing to each other. We were just bouncing along. And it was late at night, probably 11 o'clock or so. And finally, after about 15 minutes of riding, I said, companion, during that prayer, you feel anything? That was weird? And he says, yeah, I was praying against you. And I just thought, whoa, here I am praying for this poor lady that needs a blessing, and my companion, who's supposed to help me give this blessing and add his priesthood to mine, is literally praying against me at the time that I'm trying to give this blessing. And I just didn't know what to say. I just had no words for to respond to that. And, you know, every week we write to the mission president. Of course, I'm sure I wrote to him and told him what had happened. You know, and the poor mission president was just at wit's end, because he was trying to keep this missionary out in the field, and he'd put him back in the mission home for a while so that he could be right with the president, so the president keep an eye on him. And they worked with him for months and months and months, trying to get his spirituality up to where he could actually be on a mission. But he just couldn't make it. And I was transferred again, I think, and he was sent home. I don't know I think he may have had one more companion before they finally gave up. And I don't know if the missionary finally says, hey, I'm out of here, I'm leaving no matter what you say, which I think he probably did, or if they finally decided that they would give up. My mission president's attitude was, you never give up, that you try to save the person, that they're worth saving, and that you never, never, never say that a person's not worth working with, or trying to get to a place where they could be better. And he knew how disappointing it would be to this boy's parents to be sent home, but finally he had to go home. When I was back at BYU after that, after my mission, I met him about a year after I'd been home.
Your
Must have
mission
been
president or the missionary?
No, the missionary. I met the missionary. It must have been about 2 years later, because I went to Dixie for a year, a little bit, first after my mission, and then I went to BYU, and it was after I'd been at BYU for a while. He was living up Spanish Fork Canyon, and I was working for this farmer's co-op, and he came in to buy feed for his goats. He was raising goats. He'd been married, and he had left the church completely. I think he'd been excommunicated, and he was an extremely sad looking young man. I mean, he was my age, and he looked a lot older, and he was the saddest guy ever, you know. So to leave the gospel like that and to just kind of throw it over and forget it, there was a price to pay for doing that, and he paid it, and it was a heavy, heavy price. But I can't help but think that maybe if his dad would have been home more when he was younger, maybe that situation would have been different. But anyway, that was a good lesson. I learned a lot, and one of the things I learned from that experience is that you listen to the Spirit. When the Spirit tells you to do something, you do it. And both in the Sister Brawl case, where the Spirit told us don't say anything, and in this case where the Spirit told me to stop the prayer, you know, we listened to the Spirit, and it did make a difference, and it was important to listen.